Now, why didn't that work the first time? It's exactly what I know, right? So does anybody know, and we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy because ethics belongs to what discipline? Anybody? Culinary arts, engineering. Yeah, so it's a branch of philosophy. Does everybody know what the word etymology is? It's not the study of bugs. That is
the study, the literal study of words.
Yeah. So once I had asked that question and somebody was like, it's a study of bugs. I'm like, it's entomology. So etymology is the study of the origin of words and their meaning. And so philosophy comes from two Greek words, phileo or philios, Sophia. Does anybody know what Sophia means? How about filio, like Philadelphia? Love. So love of Sophia.
Reasoning?
Close. Wisdom, which is a type of knowledge. So anytime that you see all the G's, that's always the study of, right, biology, the study of life, sociology, the study of societies, anthropology, anthropos is man in Greek, study of. So all of those are types of knowledge, but traditionally wisdom was thought to be the highest type of knowledge because it wasn't restricted to any particular subject. It was a universal. So like philosophy became known as the scientia, knowledge of all things humanly knowable. So it was like there was no kind of boundary issues. You never went out of bounds with philosophy. But under philosophy, there's different kind of branches, like the study of knowledge, the study of, like, for example, metaphysics, kind of the principles beyond just the physical considerations, i.e. physics of the world, the universe. And then you also have ethics. And ethics is, one of you aptly pointed out, moral philosophy. So ethics studies what? Or attempts to? I don't remember who. Let's do a Rochambeau. No, go ahead. I'll get you in the back when I get you next.
Or guiding ideals.
Okay.
How we should treat.
Okay, good. So here you have the word treat. That's not treats like you eat, but it's something to do with like action, right? Let's get your take on, and I'll add more too.
I was gonna say like, pretty much the best decision, but ethics, like what's gonna be a good decision or not.
So decisions, another, right, action word. In ancient Greece, because this is where this all starts, right? They had, how many people have heard of the Aleut and Inuit tribes? They're the native kind of tribes in like upper Arctic kind of North America, Alaska and stuff like that. And they have something like, I forget, 60 words for snow. How many words do we have for snow? One. Why so many words for snow? For them.
Because it's important.
And
It's something to deal with every day of their life.
Yes.
You know, the different types of snow for whatever kind of conditions they can go.
Right, so they're surrounded about, right, their whole life is dealing with these things, and so they probably need different words for different conditions and different types of snow. You're right. Well, the Greeks were kind of similar. They had all these different words for knowledge because they had their reality, they were surrounded with this kind of obsession and desire to know things. So they felt it was necessary to make kind of different distinctions between types of knowledge. So they have all these different Greek words: episteme, gnosis, poesis, praxis. What's another? Theoria. All those are Greek words for knowledge, but they all kind of mean something different. Theoria, which we get the English word theory from, isn't, in terms of its etymology, simply an idea that hasn't been proven yet, or a hypothesis. It actually means knowledge. But it's a certain type of knowledge, as opposed to praxis, where we get the word practical, or to practice. Practice makes perfect, right? Well, what the heck is the difference? Well, I like to explain it in terms, now I'm setting all this up because it's going to explain ethics to you, what type of knowledge. How many people have heard means and ends? The ends justify the means. It's a means, means get to ends. What do we mean by ends? Goals. Means are like tools, or something that you use to get something else. So sometimes you want, why do people want tools and screwdrivers?
Makes the job easier.
Yeah, it means, well, I want this so I can actually do some sort of job, some type of goal I have in mind. It would be strange if somebody says no reason, I actually just like having screwdrivers and hammers around the house. And it's like, well, you don't use them? No, they would be treating the tools as an end, which would be strange. It would be sort of like money. Do you desire it? Is a goal in itself? Remember, once you get here, you don't use. You enjoy it. But enjoy it for itself. Do you enjoy money for itself, like just to have it, or do you desire it, want it for its use? Do you like to just collect money? And if somebody says, what are you going to do with that? You say, nothing, just I'm a collector. Wouldn't it be weird? So you're not going to ever spend it or use it? No. So you know that's perverse. There's something wrong with that answer. And that's why you always feel it's tragic if like somebody hoards money and then collects it and then dies. It never. Why? Because money is a means to something else. You get the money to get a car, a house, to purchase food. It would be weird if you just, no, I don't use it. I don't want it to use it. I just enjoy it. So you know that certain things are means, you desire it to get something else, and then some things are enjoyable or desirable in their own right. So there's no use that's needed. That is theoria. That's the notion of, there are certain disciplines and sciences that, why do I want to know that? You would answer, because it's enjoyable in its own right. Suppose, for example, you're not an art dealer, you're an art appreciator. And somebody says, why do you have that painting? What are you going to do with that? You would know that's an incorrect question. Why? Because unless you're an art dealer, art is not to be desired as a means to be used for something. You'd say because it's beautiful. Isn't that a perfectly good answer? Why do you love your parents? Do you say because they're a means to an end to get what I need in life? A perfect, like that would be a perverse answer. A perfectly good answer would be like, because they're lovable. Hey, look, I collect art because it's beautiful. I love my parents because they're lovable, they're my parents. And there's certain knowledge that I desire to have because, like the beautiful, it's desirable in its own right. So it's not applied. I don't use it for anything. That would be what we call theoretical knowledge. Mathematics would be something like that. If you're not an engineer, if you're an engineer, you study, why do you want to know math? So you can use it to apply to knowing how to build sound structures, correct? Okay. Then there's praxis, practical knowledge. That's applied knowledge. So and I know this is hard because I remember growing up, when we were in grade school, do you remember this? Like, why do I ever have to, well, I hate fractions. Everybody hated fractions, right? When am I ever going to use this? Well, somebody got in these kids' minds that, actually you do use fractions, but somebody got in these people's mind that knowledge is only desirable if you can use it. And that tends to kind of be stressing our society. If I was a teacher for these kids, I would say, who cares if you, like, mathematics is beautiful and fractions are awesome. Like, what's the matter with you, right? It's desirable. Mathematicians want to, there's something beautiful about knowing numbers and desirable. And yes, we can use them if I go into a different career or something like that. But it's important because society seems to only stress knowledge is desirable if you can apply it. And that's not necessarily true, but it's, again, important to make this distinction because there is certain types of disciplines that are practical. Medicine. So there, you might have a biologist who just studies biology and anatomy because they want to simply know about that. A doctor studies that for what reasons? So we can apply it, he or she. The engineer, how about law? Applied, practical. So it's concerned with action, doing, it's a praxis. Action knowledge. Ethics, as you all have pointed out, it's concerned with, what were some of the words that you used? Making correct decisions. What were some of the others? They were good. I erased them. I have to do this. I apologize. Treating people in a correct way.
It's a good study of like the highest values, how to get people to live to the highest beneficial values.
Yeah, so this is what you'll see. We'll move into this because then it's divided into different areas, but you already hit on that. Look at that. Values. duties. And then this, we'll talk about this, the status of. So we're concerned with, in one sense, value theory. If you look on page 2, I just put up kind of a summary up there so that you guys, and that's on your Moodle so that you can review that. I'll put the recorded lecture on there if you ever want to go back and review that too. Yes.
For some reason, I can't see it when I click on the graph off of Google. I can only see like the first slide, like the cover slide. Everything else is blank.
Huh.
I don't know why.
What about the rest of you? Can you do an experiment?
We can look at it after
Did you pray to God and ask him to help you?
class.
I love my wife. She always does. I'll be like, I can't believe this thing. She's like, did you pray to God or one of the saints to help you find the? I'm like, no, thank you. And every time it works, just like that. Now, it's not because it's an incantation or anything like that, but it's good to ask for help, right? Okay. Yeah, we'll fix that. If you had a choice, what type of life would you like to live? An important question, right? Let's pull it down, make it really easy. 2 choices, a good life or bad life. Okay. So we need to ask those questions. Maybe a lot of people, I mean, it's just kind of assumed, but maybe people don't ask themselves that question. Do I want to live the good life? We all assume, well then, what does it take to achieve that? That's the next question, right? Notice on page 2, it says value theory. What is the good life? Better be able to identify it. Everybody has these different ideas of what the good life. Some people think the good life's getting drunk every night, party time. And maybe you say, I don't know if that's the good life. That people could be deluded and they're miserable. Give me another example where you might think somebody thinks this is a good life, but you look at that life and you go, that's kind of tragic.
I would say like someone may like to meet and like hopefully don't get the food.
Or somebody's just get the money, like get as much as do whatever it takes to. Why are they doing that? Well, somehow in their, because all our stupid music is like telling us, right, everything. Our whole society is like, it's what you got to do. You got to. He who with the most toys, money at the end, when they die, is the winner. Kind of. You may say that's wrong. I don't think they're incorrect on what they think the good life is. So, well, we should figure. I mean, those are clear-cut cases, correct? We need to, figure out. Things that aren't so clear-cut. What things, as it says, what is the good life? And what is worth pursuing for its own sake? So notice again, you have the question of means and ends. When we ever hear that phrase for its own sake, that's this. If you get that, this is why getting money perhaps will never be a fulfilling and good life. Why? Because it's always meant to get something else. And if you're using that to get other means, or you use this in an end in itself, he who has the most toys when they die at the end wins, doesn't have a good life. There's something always missing. Why? Because those are meant to get something that's good in its own right. You want to, I finally made it, I finally achieved the goal, and there's a satisfaction in if it's the right type of goal. So that's why they bring up that question. Well, what is worth pursuing for its own sake? You might think of examples. What would be a fulfilling life to you? You know, a lot of people say, I find it's really interesting because this came up with somebody that I know. The parents had kind of, maybe you've heard the story before. The parents had kind of pushed this status, right? It's about status and getting this, you know, certain type of, you know, job and stuff like that. But then the child responds, but I find my job fulfilling. What's more important? What if the child, and you see this all the time where parents are like, we want you to be a lawyer, like, and that might be okay. But what happens when status is put over fulfillment and they say, I'm not fulfilled in this job? How many people have heard something kind of similar to a story like this? Is it the good life? I think intuitively, we think that it's important to have fulfillment over status and recognition by other people, what other people think. So that might be something worth considering. And that leads to the next question of value theory. Well, how do we improve our lot in life? And so all of you are thinking about careers you're going to have to work through. So this is, again, why even study ethics? Because it's going to apply to you in your own life and career decisions. But if you understand this stuff correctly, you should be able to apply it so that I have good reasons to actually state what is a good life versus what isn't. What are the things in life that are actually worth pursuing for their own sake, and how I would actually improve my lot in life. All of those considerations fall under value theory. Any questions about that so far? So notice you're going to have, as far as what is the good life, we're going to assess through this course different theories. And we're going to give you tools to assess and judge, is that a good theory? Should I accept what that philosopher or group of philosophers say about what is the good life? Or do I use the tools that I've been given in this class to critique it and say, I don't think they're correct in that. And then accept the one that you do believe that's correct. For example, some views will deny that the only thing desirable, that happiness is the be all end all. Some people will be like, you need to get happiness. Some theories will talk about like desire theory. Get whatever you want, do whatever you want, whatever makes you. Well, maybe those are incorrect. So we'll look at that. Let's look at the other duties That's normative ethics. So again, there's a threefold usually division in ethics: value theory, normative ethics, and meta ethics. So just reviewing real quick, value theory was a summary of what we just went over. What is a good life? What is worth pursuing for its own sake? How do we improve our life? So let's look at normative ethics. Normative ethics is going to consider some of the following questions. What are our fundamental moral duties? What's a duty? A responsibility. Now it's interesting. I really love teaching. Last semester, I taught an 18th, 19th century socio-political philosophy class. And I'd set that course up to get people to, as we went through, basically we went through Machiavelli all the way up to Karl Marx, and then we even went into some 20th century political thinkers. And I classified that as modernity. And I wanted students to see what's different, what's going on differently from the people of antiquity. And one thing is, you'll notice a contemporary age of today, rights language. I have a right to do this. I have a, you have no right to do this. Well, it's interesting because you really don't start to get that way of kind of talking until the Enlightenment with Rousseau, Hobbes, John Locke. And what rights, this kind of rights language, and they're called negative rights. What does negative mean? So it's put in a negation. You can't take my life, my liberty, you can't enslave me, or my private property, or happiness, as it puts in the founding documents. And the reason why that emerges is because a change in mindset from the ancients, who believed that they stood in a proper kind of place in nature and under God. I don't think you ever in antiquity see that I own myself, I'm autonomous, but that their life was a gift from nature and in God. And therefore, you had certain duties to one another, your family, society, etc. But what if you think about yourself is, I own myself. I own my ideas, my property, right? Then it's all kind of couched in this rights language. So there's a fundamental kind of shift in kind of thinking. Again, we're going to go back to some of the theories of antiquity. We'll visit the modern theories too, but you'll start to notice these kinds of questions. There's rights, you can't do this to, I have a right to, versus duties, as you aptly pointed out, responsibilities. And you see this in law. Laws in antiquity were meant to make you a virtuous person, a good person. Laws today are to keep you from being bad, right? They're to restrict you. Nobody says, well, why do we have this law here in Lewis and Clark County? And somebody says, well, obviously to make us better human beings and more virtuous, love of God and neighbor, right? You'd be like, what? Be like, to keep you from doing, to keep, like, it's always like to keep you from killing somebody else, to keep you from, right? So I found that interesting. I'm like, holy, the notion of law is different. less talk of kind of duties, but we're going to talk about that. And that falls under normative ethics. What are some of our most fundamental moral duties? Maybe there's some people who think they, again, in this kind of radical enlightenment, autonomy might think, I don't have any duties. I'm an island. And this is really what a lot of these thinkers, if you ever studied them, that the state of nature, like it's like you're a beast. Do you think of animals? It's like you have a duty, and I've been telling you to pick up your poopies out so don't step in, right? You have a duty to, you don't think about animals have that kind of duty. It's funny, that's a kind of, I just realized, a play on words, right, huh? Duty. They don't have a duty to pick up their duty. Well, the Enlightenment thinkers think very much like that. You're really in a state of nature like an animal. And then, but when you come into contact with other human beings, it's like kill or be killed. And then you're like, you know what, let's work out a deal. Let's make a contract. And so you come up with these laws of restraint, like don't steal my property, don't kill me, don't enslave me, stuff like that. So a person with that type of philosophy might answer that question very different. What are your moral duties? Other questions? Any questions about that before I move on to the next? Yes.
Are there any examples of like how laws are written, like about good behavior?
I'm trying to think if there's a specific, it doesn't, I don't think we necessarily need a specific example. They just thought about what law was doing. So you might have very similar laws. But what they thought they were actually meant to do, I think people thought about that differently. Because I'm trying to think, because we still use everything based kind of on Roman and Byzantine law, like we derived all those principles. So I think they're practical in that sense, and there's a notion of fairness and justice and stuff like that. But I think that there's a difference in looking at like why do we have them? Is somebody today would say like, oh, so you don't kill people, so people don't do this, so people, it always seems to be in a negative format. Whereas a person in antiquity would probably think about that because they're to help me become a better person, which is exactly to acquire virtues and not vices. In one sense, it's much more paternal, isn't it? The polis, right, is where we get the word politics from. But whether it's the empire or the city-state, it has kind of a paternal concern, like it would its children, father or mother, the children, to think about that. That's a great example. Why do let's say good parents have rules and laws for their children? Yeah, so it would be strange to be like, because they're beasts and they need to be restrained, right? That reminds me of like how modern political thinkers of the Enlightenment think about human beings, because they're beasts. They'll kill everybody, right? So it's a really pessimistic, misanthropic kind of view, isn't it? Antiquity, the ancient mind had thought about it more kind of paternal, because we care for much more familial, not this radical individualistic autonomy. We're a family, we're a group of people, we're a nation state, we're an empire, and we're actually concerned with our children, our family members being good, acquiring virtue and avoiding vice. So that leads us to the next question. We're gonna have to consider. Well, what are the characteristic traits of virtue that something makes somebody virtuous? What are the virtues? What would be vices? And people are gonna have different things to say on that.